He stood at that podium and said things that no one inside Westminster Abbey had ever dared say out loud. The Queen sat stone-faced. The royal family didn't move. But outside, on the streets of London, the crowd erupted. Because for the first time in the history of the British monarchy, someone who had been on the inside was telling the truth. And the man standing at that microphone was not a politician, not a journalist, not a rebel. He was her brother. This is the story of Charles Spencer. And what he has revealed changes the way you understand everything you thought you knew about Diana's death, her funeral, and the family that outlived her. Before we go any further, you need to understand who Diana was to the world. Not to the palace. Not to the press. To the people. She was warmth in a cold institution. She was the woman who knelt down beside AIDS patients when the cameras weren't expecting it. She hugged children in hospitals. She walked through landmine fields to make a point. In a monarchy built on distance, Diana closed the gap. She looked at ordinary people like they mattered. And they felt it. Every single one of them felt it. By the 1990s, she wasn't just a royal figure. She was the most recognized face on the planet. And beneath all of that light, something was breaking. Charles Spencer watched it happen. He had grown up beside her. He knew the girl before the tiara, before the wedding dress, before the world decided she belonged to them. And as the years passed, he watched the institution absorb her, reshape her, and then when she stopped being useful, push her out. He didn't say that publicly. Not yet. But he was watching. And he was taking notes. Then came August 31st, 1997. Spencer was in South Africa when his phone rang in the early hours of the morning. The voice on the other end was measured, controlled. Diana had been in an accident in Paris. She was severely injured. He sat in the dark and waited. He knew the photographers had been chasing her car. He had known for years what that level of pursuit could eventually lead to. Then the second call came. The voice was different this time. He said simply, "She didn't make it." There are moments in a person's life that divide everything into before and after. That phone call was Spencer's. She was gone. And the world didn't know yet. But behind the closed doors of Balmoral Castle in Scotland, another kind of silence was already beginning. The royal family said nothing. Hours passed. Then a full day. The flag at Buckingham Palace remained at full mast. There was no national address, no public grief, no acknowledgement that something extraordinary had been lost. The people poured into the streets. Flowers appeared by the thousands outside Kensington Palace. Grown men wept on the pavement. Children held handwritten notes. And the palace was quiet. That silence became its own scandal. Newspapers that had spent decades protecting the monarchy turned on it overnight. Headlines asked where the Queen was. Why wasn't the flag lowered? Why weren't the boys in London? The public didn't want ceremony. They wanted to see someone at the top feel what they were feeling. And the palace couldn't give them that. Meanwhile, two boys were sitting in the Scottish countryside being told their mother was not coming back. Harry was 12 years old. He asked the same question more than once. Is she really gone? He had spoken to her the day before. A quick call, the kind you don't treasure because you think there will be 1,000 more. Now there wouldn't be. William was 15 and learning, the way royals are taught to learn, that pain is something you carry quietly and alone. Years later Harry would say that no one inside that castle talked about her. No one comforted them in the way they needed. The grief sat in the rooms like something no one was allowed to name. 5 days after Diana died, with the anger outside the palace walls reaching a pitch that could no longer be ignored, the Queen finally appeared on television. She called Diana an exceptional human being. She praised her devotion to her sons. She said she understood the public's grief. But for many people watching, the timing told them everything they needed to know. The institution had not moved because it felt something. It had moved because it had no other choice. And then came the funeral. And what happened in the days before it is something most people have never heard. When the arrangements were being made, a palace courtier mentioned to Spencer, almost as an aside, that William and Harry would walk in the procession behind their mother's coffin. Spencer's reaction was immediate. He said no. He fought it. He told them it was wrong, that it was cruel, that no child should be made to march in public grief while the entire world zoomed in on their face. He said Diana would never have wanted it. He pushed hard. He argued. And then he was told something that ended the argument. He was told the boys wanted to do it. That it was their choice. So he stepped back. Because if they wanted to be there, he would not take that from them. He stepped back. And he was lied to. Years later, Prince Harry confirmed that there had been no choice. They had been told what they would do. As a 12-year-old boy inside one of the most controlled institutions on Earth, Harry had no power to refuse. He followed orders. And Spencer, who had believed he was honoring their wishes, only learned the truth long after the cameras had stopped rolling. He had been moved out of the way. And it had worked. On the morning of September 6, 1997, the coffin emerged from Kensington Palace. The streets of London were a mile deep with silent, weeping people. And then the boys appeared. William, 15, Harry, 12. Walking in a line with the men of the family that had raised them inside an institution that had broken their mother. Their faces were pale, their eyes were cast down. The crowd sobbed around them, but the boys held themselves together, every step watched by 2.5 billion people. Harry later described feeling numb, as though his emotions had simply switched off and something automatic had taken over. Like he was watching it happen to someone else. Spencer walked beside them and felt the full weight of his failure to protect them from this moment. And then he reached the podium. What Spencer said inside Westminster Abbey that afternoon was unlike anything ever spoken at a royal funeral. He didn't eulogize Diana the way institutions eulogize people they've lost. He didn't perform grief. He delivered a verdict. He called his sister the most hunted person of the modern age. He said she needed no royal title to generate her particular kind of magic, a sentence that landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. He was saying directly to the people around him that Diana's power had never come from them. She had given it to herself. And they had spent years trying to contain something they didn't create and couldn't understand. And then he made a promise. He said that Diana's blood family, not the Windsors, would do everything they could to protect William and Harry. To continue the imaginative and loving way that Diana had been raising them. He didn't shout it. He didn't wave his arms. He simply said it, clearly, into the microphone, in front of the Queen and the cameras and 2.5 billion watching eyes. The royal family didn't applaud. They couldn't. But outside the Abbey walls, the crowd did. And the applause moved like a wave, building through the streets of London, from the people who had loved her and who now recognized that someone standing at the very center of power was finally saying what they all believed. Spencer later admitted he couldn't keep that promise. William and Harry were too deep inside the royal machine. There was no way to pull them out of it. The institution controlled their future, their security, their identity. He had made a vow in front of the world that the world would not let him fulfill. And he knew it, almost as soon as he said it. But he meant it. That much was never in doubt. What Spencer could not have known standing at that podium was what would happen to Harry specifically in the years that followed. Because the story didn't end in 1997. It continued, quietly and then loudly, through Harry's entire life inside the institution. He carried what happened to his mother not as history but as something personal, something he relived every time a camera followed him too closely down a dark road. Every photographer felt like an echo of that tunnel in Paris. When he watched Meghan face the same machinery that had consumed his mother, the same press cruelty, the same absence of protection from within, something in him made a decision. He had seen what happened when someone stayed. He had watched Diana try to survive inside a system that didn't want her to thrive. He had walked behind her coffin at 12 years old because he was told to. He was not 12 anymore. In 2020 he left. He and Meghan stepped back from royal duties, crossed an ocean, and tried to build a life outside the institution. The palace and the press called it many things. Harry called it survival. And if you understand everything that came before it, if you understand the phone call Spencer received in the dark, the silence at Balmoral, the walk behind the coffin, the lie about the choice, the promise made from a podium, then Harry's departure looks less like rebellion and more like the only logical conclusion of a story that started long before he was born. Spencer never spoke about it publicly in those terms. But those who knew him understood where he stood. He had spent decades saying clearly that the institution had failed Diana. Harry had now spent decades living that failure from the inside. Their paths were different, but the verdict was the same. Diana is gone. But the questions she leaves behind have never stopped demanding answers. And perhaps the most important one is this. How many people inside powerful systems are still being told there is no choice, and believing it? If this story made you feel something, leave a comment below. And if you want to understand the full picture of what Diana's life and death set in motion, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.